Hello, my dears. Tonight's story is about Callie, who returns to her best friend's grieving family and learns that Quiet Wren has loved her since they were girls. Because sometimes the love hidden in silence finally finds its voice in the doorway of loss and becomes a beginning at last again. The first thing I remembered about Wren Hartley was not her face, though later I would become unreasonable about her face, about the pale crescent of concentration between her brows, about the way grief made her cheekbones look almost carved, about the small indentation at the corner of her mouth that appeared only when she was trying not to smile. The first thing I remembered was a book lying on the third step of the staircase in Josie's house, spine up, as if it had fallen there by accident. I was 15, still growing into my own elbows, still wearing my school cardigan with paint on the cuffs, still convinced that every silence in a room was an emergency I had been personally invited to fix. The book was old and blue and smelled faintly of dust and lavender soap. There was no note inside, no name, no explanation. Just a pressed fern tucked between pages 72 and 73, and a sentence underlined in pencil so lightly I almost missed it. Some doors open only when no one is watching. At the time, I thought Wren had dropped it. That was all. Josie was shouting from the kitchen for me to hurry up because her mother had made cinnamon toast, and if we did not get there before her brother's friends arrived, though Josie did not have a brother and never had, she said this sort of thing often. All exaggeration and weather. There would be nothing left but the burnt corners. I picked up the book, ran my thumb over the underlined sentence, and called up the stairs. Wren, I think this is yours. There was a pause so complete that even Josie stopped shouting. Then a door somewhere above me clicked shut with the gentleness of someone trying not to be heard. I carried the book downstairs, put it on the counter beside the butter dish, and forgot about it in the way 15-year-old girls forget things that have not yet learned how to haunt them. That was the trick of Wren. She was always there and always nearly gone. In that house, she existed the way certain corners existed. The alcove by the back door where umbrellas went to mildew, the narrow landing with the radiator that hissed through winter, the attic window you could see from the garden if you stood under the apple tree and tilted your head back. You did not notice those things every day, but you would have noticed if they disappeared. I spent half my adolescence in the Hartley house, though I had my own home 10 streets away, and parents who loved me in practical, slightly distracted ways. Josie found me on the second day of year 8, when my lunch bag split open in the corridor, and my satsuma rolled under a row of lockers. She got down on her stomach to retrieve it, came up with dust in her hair, and announced that we were friends now because humiliation was legally binding. By the end of that week, I knew the code to her side gate. By the end of that month, Margaret Hartley had begun putting an extra plate at the table without asking. Margaret was the sort of woman who could make a house feel as though it had shoulders. She was broad in laugh, narrow in patience, and impossible to embarrass. She smelled of thyme, hairspray, and the lemon polish she used on furniture she claimed not to care about. She corrected my grammar when I was being lazy, fed me when I was being dramatic, and once marched into school in a red coat to inform the deputy head that calling Josie overexcitable was a failure of vocabulary, not a disciplinary assessment. I loved her before I knew how to separate other people's mothers from my own hunger for them. She let me. She let me sit at her kitchen table and talk too much, let me cry over university applications, let me bring my sketchbooks and spread charcoal dust over her placemats. If Josie was the doorway, Margaret was the room behind it. And Wren was the locked cabinet no one mentioned because everyone had learned to live around it. She was 3 years older than us, which at 13 and 16 meant she belonged to an entirely different century. She had dark hair she wore parted with almost severe care, a habit of holding mugs with both hands even when they were empty, and a stillness that made me nervous because I did not know what to do with it. I was made of motion. I filled space instinctively. I asked questions because I was afraid of what would happen if I stopped. Wren answered as if words cost her something physical. Yes, no, it's on the sideboard. Josie's in the garden. Your sleeve is on fire. That last one had been true, sort of. I had leaned too near a candle during Margaret's birthday dinner and singed a thread at my cuff. Wren reached across the table, pinched the ember out between her fingers, then looked at her plate for the rest of the meal, while I laughed too loudly to cover the tremor that had gone through me. I told myself I found her intimidating. That was a respectable word. It had edges and usefulness. It did not require me to understand why I noticed when she came into a room, or why I felt rearranged by the brief pressure of her attention. I noticed lots of things about people. I was, according to Josie, socially nosy with good intentions. I remembered everyone's coffee order, everyone's birthday, everyone's exact expression when they said they were fine and meant the opposite. It was nothing, I told myself, that I remembered Wren drank tea without milk and left half of it to cool on windowsills. It was nothing that I knew she disliked orange peel and marmalade, that she wore the same gray jumper through 3 winters, that she read at the dinner table with one finger resting against the margin, as if keeping the sentence alive beneath her touch. The memory that later returned to me most sharply happened when I was 17. Margaret had made roast chicken and too many side dishes because Josie had failed a driving test, and Margaret believed grief should be carbohydrates with gravy. Wren was 20 then, home for the summer before university, thinner than I remembered, quieter if that was possible, with her hair cut to just below her jaw. I had been reaching for the dish of green beans at the same time she was. Our hands met over the table, not dramatically, not even fully, just my knuckle brushing hers. Wren pulled back so fast her elbow struck her water glass. It tipped, rolled, and spilled across the white cloth in a bright, spreading sheet. Everyone moved at once. Josie shouted, "Wren, honestly!" And Margaret lifted the roast out of danger, and I grabbed napkins, apologizing because apologizing was easier than acknowledging that Wren had gone pale as milk. She would not look at me for the rest of dinner. I thought I had embarrassed her. Years later, I would understand that embarrassment had been the surface. Under it was a whole country. There was another memory from that same summer, evening light in the garden after a day so hot the paving stones seemed to breathe. Josie and I had been sprawled on the grass, laughing at nothing intelligent, drunk on lemonade, and our own importance. Wren stood by the apple tree in a linen dress the color of unbleached paper, a book hanging loose in one hand. The sun was behind her, and for a second she looked almost transparent at the edges. I looked up and found her watching us. Not watching Josie, watching me. Her expression was not cold. That was what I could never explain, not even to myself. It was not cold, not resentful, not amused. It was a kind of longing so disciplined it had become nearly formal. Then Josie threw a cushion at me. I shrieked, the moment broke, and Wren lowered her eyes to the page as if she had never lifted them. At 23, I moved in with a man named Daniel because he was kind and steady and never made me feel unsure of myself. He came with me to a Hartley Christmas, where Josie crowned him with paper and Margaret judged him over bread sauce. Wren congratulated me on the flat, asked Daniel what he did, and disappeared before pudding. Daniel said later, "Your friend's sister is intense." I said, "She's just shy," and felt oddly protective of a woman who had barely spoken to me in a decade. I did not think of myself as someone with secrets. That may have been my greatest secret. I had preferences, certainly. I liked soft pencils, crowded kitchens, children who tried to paint horses and produced magnificent purple dogs instead. I liked holding hands at the cinema and coming home to someone who had left the hall light on. I liked Daniel's patience and the warm, predictable shape of our life. But sometimes a woman would pass me on the street with rain caught in her eyelashes, and I would feel something in me turn like a key in a lock I did not know I owned. Sometimes a new teacher at school would lean over my desk, laughing, and the air between us would shimmer so briefly I could pretend it was nothing but bad ventilation. I became skilled at not naming things. It helped that no one asked. It helped that I was good at being happy enough. Margaret's illness arrived in increments, which was crueler than a storm. A storm announces itself. It darkens the sky, breaks branches, floods the drains. You can stand at the window and say, "There, that is the thing that has come for us." Margaret's illness came as fatigue, then a scan, then a phrase spoken gently by a doctor who did not have to live inside it. It came as casseroles in the freezer, tablets sorted into plastic compartments, Josie's voice on the phone at midnight pretending she only wanted to ask whether poster paint came out of wool. It came as Wren's car outside the house, more often than not, her silhouette in the kitchen window at hours when other people slept. By then, Daniel and I had separated with such tenderness, people kept waiting for the hidden cruelty to show itself. There was none. We had simply reached the end of what gentleness could disguise. He cried. I cried. We divided the books by who had underlined more of them, and promised to remain friends in a way both of us meant and neither of us was sure how to do. So I was untethered when Margaret began dying. That is not noble to say, but it is true. I had time I might not have had otherwise. I came after school with bags of shopping, sat with Josie on the stairs when the hospice nurse was upstairs, made tea that went cold, washed mugs, learned the geography of a house under siege. The Hartley kitchen changed first. The counter where Margaret used to knead dough became a pharmacy of brown bottles and folded instructions. The calendar filled with appointments and then stopped being crossed off because no one wanted to admit what kind of countdown it had become. Flowers appeared and died in vases. People wrote messages and cards that said she was strong, as if strength were a contract illness could be shamed into honoring. Wren and I spoke more during those months than we had in all the years before, which meant perhaps 40 sentences total. She would be at the sink at 2 a.m. when I stayed over with Josie, sleeves rolled, hair escaping its clip, washing one mug for 5 minutes because there was nothing else she could bear to do. I would come in for water and find her there, lit by the extractor fan. "You should sleep," I would say, because I was foolish enough to think advice was comfort. "So should you," she would answer, eyes on the tap. Once I said, "Has she eaten?" And Wren said, 3 spoons of soup and half a biscuit. She told me the biscuit was an insult to biscuits. I laughed before I could stop myself. Wren's mouth moved, barely. It was not a smile exactly, more the memory of one passing through. Then she looked past my shoulder and said, "Josie's in the sitting room," as if she had caught herself too near a flame. The last time I saw Margaret conscious, she asked me to sit on the bed because the chair made me look like a visiting bank manager. Her hair had grown wispy, her hands almost translucent against the quilt, but her eyes were still blue and impatient. Josie had gone to argue with a pharmacist. Wren was downstairs, I thought, or perhaps in the hall. The house was so quiet that even the heating pipes seemed to whisper. Margaret patted my hand with the dry, papery strength of someone blessing and scolding at once. "You're a good girl, Callie," she said. I opened my mouth to protest being called a girl at 28, but she narrowed her eyes. "Don't make that face. Let dying women be inaccurate." I laughed and then cried, which annoyed both of us. She looked at me for a long moment, the way she had looked at school letters and underbaked cakes and boys Josie claimed were just friends. Then she said, "Some people take the long way to themselves." I thought she meant me. I thought she meant Daniel, my job, the flat I had not yet made feel like mine. Perhaps she did. Perhaps Margaret had always been capable of meaning more than one thing at once. She died on a Tuesday before dawn, when the world outside was still black and silver and undecided. Josie called me at 5:12. I remembered the exact minute because my phone lit up beside my bed, and I knew before I answered. Some calls arrive with their contents already inside them. I drove through empty streets with my coat over pajamas and my hair coming loose from a knot. The Hartley house had one lamp on in the hall. Josie met me at the door with a face I did not recognize. She did not cry at first. She said, "Mum's gone," in the formal tone people use for train announcements. And then she made a sound that seemed to tear the morning open. I held her on the doormat while cold air moved around our ankles. Wren was upstairs. I saw her once that morning from the landing. She stood at the foot of Margaret's bed with her arms wrapped around herself, not touching anything, not moving. The nurse spoke to her gently. Wren nodded. Her face was composed in a way that frightened me more than Josie's collapse. It was the face of a person holding a door shut against a flood. When she looked up and saw me, something in her eyes changed so quickly I doubted it afterward. Relief, maybe. Pain. Recognition. Then the door closed again, and she said, "Josie needs you." I went back downstairs because she was right, and because being needed by Josie was a role I knew how to perform. The funeral was on a gray winter morning with rain so fine it seemed less like weather than a texture laid over everything. The church smelled of wet wool, lilies, and old hymn books. Margaret had once said she wanted no fuss and then left 3 handwritten pages of instructions about readings, flowers, and which cousin was not to be trusted near the sherry. Or the vicar, who had known her only in the last months, spoke with sincere inadequacy. Josie sobbed openly into a tissue that disintegrated in her fist. Wren stood on the other side of the aisle in a black coat that looked too thin for the cold, her hair pinned at the nape of her neck, her face lifted toward the stained glass window as though she were translating the light into a language she could survive. I sat between Josie and an aunt who kept patting my knee by mistake. When they carried the coffin out, something in me went with it. Not all of me, just the version of me who had believed, childishly, that Margaret would always be in the kitchen when I needed to know where to put my hands. After the burial, we returned to the house, which had been invaded by kindness. Kindness arrived in foil-covered dishes, in damp coats hung over banisters, in cousins who said, "She looks peaceful now," as if peace were not an insult when it had come so late. People filled the sitting room and the kitchen and the narrow hall. They balanced plates on their knees, asked after one another's children, misremembered Margaret in ways that made Josie's jaw tighten. Someone brought a casserole with raisins in it, and even in grief, Josie whispered, "Mum would have staged a haunting." I laughed because the alternative was howling. Wren did not laugh. She stood near the bookshelf with a cup of tea she never drank, accepting condolences as if each one were a small, blunt object being placed carefully into her hands. I moved through the afternoon in the practiced trance of the useful person. I found more forks. I rescued Margaret's favorite mug from a neighbor who was using it for instant coffee. I took Josie upstairs when she began shaking and sat with her on the bathroom floor until she could breathe again. I told an uncle where to smoke and a cousin where not to put her baby's wet pram. I carried plates to the kitchen and scraped untouched sandwiches into the bin while my own grief followed me like a dog I did not have time to feed. Every so often I saw Wren in another room, still and remote, and felt a strange pull in my chest. She was not managing. She was disappearing with extraordinary discipline. There was a moment in the sitting room when our eyes met over the heads of 2 neighbors discussing traffic. Wren's gaze stopped on me with such naked exhaustion that I almost crossed the room. Then a woman in pearls touched her elbow, and Wren looked away. I told myself she did not want me. Not then, not ever in any way that mattered. Wren had made a life of not wanting to be reached. I respected that, or thought I did. Respect can be a cowardly word when we use it to avoid the risk of offering our hand. By late afternoon, the house had begun to thin. Rain ticked at the windows. The hallway was crowded with coats, black umbrellas, shoes kicked crookedly against the skirting board. I went to find my own coat because Josie had fallen asleep on the sofa under a blanket, and Margaret's sister had finally stopped telling the story about the time Margaret overcooked lamb in 1989. I wanted 5 minutes alone in my car before I became myself again. I was reaching between 2 damp wool sleeves when I heard my name. Not loudly. Wren had never done anything loudly in her life. It was almost swallowed by the house, by the clatter of dishes, by a burst of laughter from the kitchen that felt obscene and necessary. Callie. I turned. She was in the narrow strip of hallway behind me, close enough that I could see the rain caught in the dark fabric of her coat, though she had not been outside. Her face was bloodless. Her eyes were fixed not on my face, but on my wrist, as if she had chosen a point of contact in advance because anything else would undo her. Her hand closed around me. Not hard. That was what I remembered most. Not a grab of panic, Not a claim, not a demand. Precise, careful. Her fingers circled my wrist just below the bone, warm and dry, and my whole body went still around that one small fact. It felt rehearsed, though not practiced on anyone living. It felt like something she had held in her mind for so long that touching me was less an action than the end of an era. She looked up then. Full eye contact, for perhaps the first time in our lives. It was not a door opening, it was a wall vanishing. "I've loved you since we were 15, she said. I just didn't know how to say it. The words entered me without meaning at first. They were too plain, too impossible. They did not dress themselves as confession should. No trembling preamble, no apology, no explanation. Just a fact placed between us in the hallway of her dead mother's house, while someone in the next room asked whether there was more coffee. I stared at her. My mouth opened. Nothing came out. Her thumb moved once against my pulse, so lightly I might have imagined it, and then she released me. "Ren," I said, or tried to say, but she was already stepping back. Her face had closed, not with regret exactly, but with the terrible calm of someone who had thrown herself from a height and was waiting to find out whether the ground would be merciful. She turned and walked into the crowd. A cousin in a navy suit touched her shoulder. Ren nodded. Someone handed her a plate. The hallway filled again with ordinary noise. My wrist burned as if her hand were still there. I do not remember driving home. I remember sitting in my parked car outside my building with the heater blowing cold air because I had not turned the engine fully off. My phone buzzed 3 times. Josie, probably. Or Daniel, who had sent a kind message that morning. Or school. The world was full of people who did not know that history had just shifted 6 inches to the left and everything on it had fallen over. I looked at my wrist in the orange glow of the street lamp. There was no mark. I wanted there to be one, which frightened me more than the confession. Inside my flat, I took off my black dress and left it on the bathroom floor like a shed skin. I made tea and did not drink it. I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling until the plaster began arranging itself into maps. Ren's voice repeated in me with unbearable steadiness. "I've loved you since we were 15. Not I loved you once, not I had a crush, not grief has made me reckless. Loved since 16 years of a verb kept alive without air. I tried to place it somewhere sensible and found there was nowhere sensible for it to go. Then memory began doing what memory does when given a new law. It reorganized the evidence. The book on the stairs became not a dropped thing, but an offering. The underlined sentence lifted its head. Some doors open only when no one is watching. The spilled water at dinner stopped being embarrassment and became fear touching the edge of desire. The garden at 17 changed color. Ren's departures from rooms, her careful distance from Daniel, her refusal to meet my eyes, the way she always seemed to know when I had arrived and when I was leaving, even if she had not appeared to notice me at all. Every small fact I had filed under Ren, being Ren was taken down, dusted, and relabeled in a hand I recognized as my own. I should have been frightened. Part of me was. Not of Ren, never of Ren. I was frightened of the speed with which my own life began answering back. Daniel's kind face rose in my mind, and with it the ache of our gentle failure. The women I had noticed and unnoticed. The way I had built myself around being easy to understand, then mistaken that ease for truth. I had never thought of wanting Ren because wanting required imagination, and I had not allowed myself any in her direction. She had been Josie's older sister, Margaret's difficult daughter, a quiet figure passing through doorways with a book against her chest. She had also been, apparently, the locked room beside my life, lit from within all along. Near dawn, I found the blue book on my shelf. I had kept it. I did not remember deciding to. It had moved with me from my parents' house to university, from university to Daniel, from Daniel to this flat. The fern was still between pages 72 and 73. brittle now, its delicate ribs preserved like a small green ghost. The underlined sentence was there, almost invisible. I sat on the floor with the book open in my lap and began to cry. Not because I knew what I felt, but because I understood that not knowing had not protected anyone. Not Ren. Not me. Not Josie, sleeping under a blanket in a motherless house, while a secret older than half our friendship breathed for the first time in the open air. Before we continue, a quick note. This version is made for YouTube, so some of the more passionate and intimate scenes between these two women have been softened or shortened. The full, uncensored version, with every private moment left intact, is available on my Patreon. If you want to experience the complete story the way it was written, the link is in the description below. 2 days later, I went back to the Hartley house with a folder of forms, a bag of groceries, and the emotional sophistication of a woman walking into traffic because the alternative was standing still. Josie had texted at 8 in the morning. "Can you come help me speak fluent death admin? I'm looking at pension paperwork and a leaflet about bereavement support that has a stock photo of a sad fern." I said I would be there by 10. I did not ask whether Ren would be home. The question was both too large and too small. The house looked worse in daylight. Funeral flowers leaned in vases, plates had been abandoned on the sideboard, and the air held lilies, old coffee, and central heating. Josie opened the door wearing Margaret's cardigan over pajama bottoms and one earring. "I'm a widow in a Victorian novel," she said. "Except the widow is my own sanity." She hugged me too hard. I hugged her back and felt guilt move through me, sharp as a pin. Ren was in the kitchen. Of course she was. She stood at the counter slicing bread with unnecessary precision, wearing dark jeans and a navy jumper with the sleeves pushed to her elbows. Her hair was loose, which made her look younger and more tired. When I walked in, the knife stopped. Not dramatically. Ren did not do drama. The blade simply paused against the board, and the pause had a pulse. "Morning," she said. "Morning," I said. Josie, because the universe has a cruel sense of staging, looked between us and noticed nothing. "I need both of you because apparently Mum's paperwork has bred in captivity. Also, someone has to stop me from eating only biscuits today." "I can make eggs," I offered. "You are a saint." "I am a teacher. We have similar martyr complexes, but worse shoes." Ren's mouth flickered. I saw it because I was looking. That was the problem now. I was looking at everything. The delicate vein at her wrist when she reached for plates. The way she moved around me with almost ceremonial care. The fact that she did not apologize by pretending the hallway had not happened. She did not mention it either. The morning became a ballet of avoidance performed in a kitchen too small for dignity. Josie sat at the table surrounded by folders, cursing at utility bills. I scrambled eggs. Ren made toast. Our shoulders did not touch. Twice we reached for the same drawer, and both stopped as if an alarm had gone off. At 11:30, Josie's phone rang. She looked at the screen and groaned. "Aunt Linda. If I don't answer, she'll come here and reorganize grief by height." "Take it in the sitting room," Ren said. Josie narrowed her eyes. "Are you using your eldest daughter voice on me?" "I only have one voice." "That is tragically true." Josie grabbed the phone and left, already saying, "Hi, Linda. Yes, I'm eating. No, I haven't made any decisions about the curtains because Mum died. She did not leave me a hotel." The kitchen fell silent behind her. Not empty. Never empty. Margaret was in the chipped mug by the kettle, the recipe cards tucked into a tin, the hook where her apron still hung. Ren placed both hands flat on the counter. I stood by the sink, unable to decide whether to pick up a sponge, run, or laugh. My heart was beating in my throat with such stupidity that I almost resented it. "I didn't mean to make things harder," Ren said. Her voice was low, not expressionless. I wondered how I had ever mistaken her for cold, when every word seemed to cost her heat. "You said you weren't apologizing," I answered. though she had said no such thing aloud. Or at least, that's what it felt like. I'm not apologizing for the truth. She looked down at her hands. I am sorry for the timing. I let out a breath that was almost a laugh. Your mother's funeral was an ambitious choice. Yes, the corner of her mouth moved. I would not recommend it. I didn't know, I said. I know. No, I mean... I turned toward her fully. She did not look away this time, though I could see the effort it took. I didn't know. And then I went home and understood that I should have. Something crossed her face. Pain and tenderness tangled too tightly to separate. You shouldn't have had to. Maybe not, but I keep remembering things. I'm sorry. That sounded like apologizing for the truth. It's possible I'm inconsistent under stress. Since we were 15, I asked. I need to ask that, even if it's unfair. She nodded once. Yes. But you were 18. Yes. And I was Josie's friend. Yes. And a girl. The words sat there. Ren's eyes lifted to mine, and for the first time I saw the old loneliness without its cover. So was I. I had no answer. The house creaked softly, as if Margaret herself had shifted in another room. Ren took a breath and folded her arms, not defensively, but as though holding herself together at the seams. I didn't understand it at first, she said, or I understood enough to be afraid of it. You were bright and loud and always in the kitchen. You made Mum laugh. You made Josie worse, which I did not think possible. You asked me questions and waited for answers as if I might actually provide them. Her mouth tilted faintly. It was inconvenient. Inconvenient, I repeated. Devastating seemed melodramatic. It's a funeral week. You're allowed one melodramatic word. Then devastating. She said it so quietly it almost vanished. But not because you did anything. You didn't. I was aware of the boundaries. Your age, Josie, my own confusion. Later there was distance, university, your life, men, time. It became something I had put away because I did not know where else to put it. Archived, I said, thinking of her work. Of rare books repaired with brushes and patience. A real smile touched her then, small and aching. Poorly catalogued. What do you want from me? I asked. Ren's answer came too quickly to have been improvised. Nothing you don't want to give. That should have made it easier. It did not. Generosity can be its own pressure when you are still trying to understand the shape of your wanting. I nodded, though I was not sure at what. I don't know what I want. I know. I don't want to hurt Josie. The silence changed. Ren looked toward the sitting room door. Neither do I. She doesn't know? No. A pause. Mum did. I stared at her. Margaret knew? Ren's face shifted in a way I could not read. Not everything. Enough. Before I could ask, Josie's voice rose from the sitting room, still arguing with Aunt Linda. Ren closed her eyes for half a second, and the conversation ended not because it was finished, but because life, with its paperwork and relatives and eggs going cold, pushed back in. We spent the rest of the day sorting documents into piles labeled urgent, later, and what fresh hell is this? Ren and I did not speak of the confession again, but something had been opened that could not be closed. Josie needed me constantly and unpredictably. She would go quiet for 12 hours, then send 17 messages about probate, milk, a memory of Margaret singing badly to Fleetwood Mac, and whether she was a terrible daughter for wanting to throw away the decorative plates. I went over after work. I sat with her on the sitting room floor while she sorted sympathy cards into piles according to how much they annoyed her. I held her when she cried because she had found one of Margaret's hairpins in the sofa. I laughed with her when we discovered Margaret had kept an entire drawer of instruction manuals for appliances she no longer owned. Grief made Josie porous. Everything entered her. Everything hurt. One afternoon, she lay on the rug with her feet on the sofa and said, "Ren is driving me mad." I froze with a mug halfway to my mouth. How so? "She's doing that thing where she's useful instead of alive." Josie rubbed both hands over her face. "She's arranged the death certificates, called the solicitor, cataloged Mum's medical equipment for return, and somehow cleaned the oven. Who cleans an oven during bereavement? Someone avoiding the larger horror by attacking carbonized cheese." Josie pointed at me. "Exactly. She never lets anyone in. Not even Mum, really. Not fully. Mum tried, God, she tried. But Ren has always been like a museum after closing. Beautiful, probably, but all the lights off and a security guard judging you." I looked down into my tea. The surface trembled slightly because my hand did. Josie was wrong. That was the terrible tenderness of it. Ren had let someone in for 16 years without that person knowing. She had kept a room lit in herself with my name on the door, and I had walked past it carrying snacks and school gossip. But I could not say that. Not to Josie. Not while her grief was raw enough to bleed through ordinary conversation. "She loved Margaret?" I said carefully. "I know she did." Josie's voice softened. "I do know that. I just wish she'd let it show in a way that didn't make me feel like a Labrador at a tax audit." The image was so Josie that I laughed, then felt tears sting my eyes. Our friendship had always been built on the ease of saying anything. Now there was a whole territory inside me I was patrolling with warning signs. I hated it. I hated that Ren's confession had made me feel more truthful to myself and less truthful to my best friend at the same time. Loyalty, I discovered, was not a clean line. It was a knot, and every tug tightened it somewhere else. A week after the funeral, Ren texted me. I knew it was her before I opened it because the preview contained punctuation so careful it practically wore a waistcoat. "I found something of Mum's you may want to see. Not urgent, W." I stared at the message for 10 minutes. Then I wrote, "When?" Her reply came after 12 minutes, which I spent behaving like a teenager and despising myself for it. "Tomorrow afternoon, if you're free. Josie will be at the registrar's." At 4 the next day, the house was quiet in a way it never had been when Margaret was alive. Not peaceful. Paused. Ren opened the door before I knocked, which meant she had been watching or listening. She wore a charcoal cardigan with one cuff unraveling. I wanted to touch the loose thread and had to put my hands in my coat pockets like a criminal. "Josie said you were helping with displays today," Ren said, stepping back. "Dinosaurs." The brief was prehistoric landscape. The execution was mostly green violence. Sounds accurate to the period. "You have no idea how many volcanoes happened in one corner." She led me to the small back room Margaret had called the study, though it held more sewing supplies and old shopping bags than books. On the desk lay a biscuit tin patterned with faded roses. Ren touched the lid but did not open it at once. Her fingers were long, nails short, a faint paper cut near the thumb. I noticed everything now. It was exhausting. "Mum kept letters," she said. "Cards, notes, things we made as children. I was looking for an insurance policy and found this." Inside the tin were envelopes tied with ribbon, school photos, a clay thumbprint Josie had made in nursery, and a folded piece of blue paper. Ren handed it to me. The paper was soft from being opened many times. My name was on the front in Margaret's impatient handwriting. Callie, age 15, impossible fringe. I laughed before I could stop myself. My fringe was not impossible. It defied several laws. "You knew me when I had side bangs. You have no moral authority." Her eyes warmed, and for a second the room was not only grief. Then I unfolded the paper. It was a drawing I had made at 15 of Margaret's kitchen. I remembered it suddenly. A school assignment about perspective. I had drawn the table too large, the window crooked, Josie as a blur in the doorway, Margaret at the stove with one hand on her hip. In the corner, almost hidden by the stairs, I had drawn Ren reading. I had forgotten that. Ren had not been the subject. I must have put her in because she was there, because the house would not have been accurate without her. I didn't know she kept this, I said. She kept everything, including a receipt from 2004 for batteries, so perhaps don't be flattered. But her voice had thickened. I looked from the drawing to her. You wanted me to see this? Partly. She sat in the chair by the desk. I remained standing because sitting felt too intimate, and standing felt ridiculous. Ren took a breath. There's something else. She reached into the tin and removed a small envelope, unsealed. Her name was written on it. Ren. No date. She held it without opening it. Mum gave this to me 2 weeks before she died. Or rather, she told me where it was, and said I was not to read it while she was still alive because she did not have the energy to be argued with. Her mouth trembled. I read it after. Ren, you don't have to show me. I'm not going to. She looked up. Not all of it. Some things are mine, but there's a line I think you should know about, because it concerns you, though she didn't use your name. My heart had become very quiet. Okay. Ren opened the envelope and drew out a page. Her hands shook once, then steadied. She did not read from it. She knew the words already. She wrote, "The trouble with waiting is that time doesn't wait back." The room seemed to inhale. Outside, a car passed on the wet road. Somewhere in the house, pipes knocked softly. I thought of Margaret in her bed, diminished and still more perceptive than all of us. I thought of her watching Ren watch me across years of dinners, birthdays, summer evenings, hospital visits, not interfering, not naming what Ren could not bear named, but knowing. Holding it, perhaps, the way mothers hold the dangerous, fragile things their children cannot yet carry. She knew, I said. Ren folded the letter carefully along its existing crease. She knew enough. Once, near the end, she asked me whether I had ever been in love. I said it didn't matter. She said that was not an answer, just a hiding place with curtains. A brief, broken smile. She could be very irritating when dying. She was irritating while healthy, too. Yes, but with better lung capacity. We both laughed, and then Ren put a hand over her mouth. Her eyes filled. I moved without deciding to, crossing the room until I stood beside her chair. I did not touch her. I wanted to. I wanted so badly that the wanting had texture, a fine ache beneath my skin. But grief sat with us, and Margaret's letter lay between us, and there are moments when tenderness must know how to wait without becoming another kind of theft. She told me not to mistake silence for safety, Ren said. I was angry with her for that. She was dying, and I wanted comfort, not instruction. But she kept looking at me as if she could see all the years I had wasted lined up behind me. Do you think they were wasted? Ren looked at the drawing, at the little version of herself I had placed in the corner without understanding why. No, not all of them. Loving someone quietly is still loving them. It shaped me. It made me careful. It made me lonely. Sometimes it made me kinder than I might have been. Sometimes less brave. She looked at me then. But I think she was right that waiting began to feel virtuous because it asked nothing of anyone else. That doesn't mean it asked nothing of me. I sat on the edge of the desk because my knees had become unreliable. I don't know what to do with this. I don't expect you to. That's the second impossible kindness you've offered me. What was the first? Wanting nothing I don't want to give. Ren's gaze dropped to her hands. It's not kindness. It's the only way I can survive having told you. Josie found out in a way that was both ordinary and inevitable. Secrets do not need a dramatic door to enter a room. Sometimes they come in through the face of someone you love and have known too long to misread. It happened on a Sunday afternoon, 2 weeks later. The three of us were at the house, sorting Margaret's clothes because Josie had declared she was ready, and then spent 20 minutes sitting on the bedroom floor holding one of Margaret's scarves to her face. Wren folded sweaters with reverent neatness. I made piles for charity, keep, undecided, and absolutely not because Margaret would return from the afterlife to object. Josie laughed, cried, laughed again. We were all fragile. We were all trying. At some point, my phone buzzed downstairs. Wren said, "I'll get it," because she was nearest the door. It was nothing. A small kindness. She returned with the phone and handed it to me. Our fingers touched. I had become more careful by then, but not careful enough. I looked at her. She looked at me. It lasted half a second. Less, but it contained the study, the letter, the hallway, the book, every unsaid thing now breathing between us. Josie saw. I watched the knowledge arrive in her face. Not complete knowledge, not yet. A narrowing, a stillness that looked almost like Wren's and broke my heart because I had never noticed how much of her sister lived in her. She said nothing then. She took the scarf from her lap, folded it badly, and put it in the wrong pile. 10 minutes later, she announced she had a headache and needed everyone to leave. I texted that evening. "Are you okay?" She did not answer. The next morning, she appeared at my flat at 7:30, still in work clothes, though she was not due at her office until 9, hair damp from rain, eyes bright with the terrible focus of someone who has spent the night assembling a truth from scraps. "Is there something going on with you and Wren?" she asked before I had fully opened the door. The hallway outside my flat smelled of wet concrete and someone's toast. My first instinct was to lie, which horrified me. Not because I wanted to deceive her, but because I wanted one more minute before the world changed. Josie saw that too, her face closed. "Oh my God," she said. "Josie, come in." "No, answer me." "There isn't... Not exactly, it's complicated." "That is a yes wearing a cheap hat." I flinched. She told me something after the funeral. After Mum's funeral? In the hallway, she said she'd loved me since we were 15. For a moment, Josie simply stared. Rain dripped from the ends of her hair onto her coat collar. Then she laughed once, not because anything was funny. Of course she did. Of course Wren chose the least normal possible moment to become emotionally literate. "Josie, and you didn't tell me." I stepped back as if she had struck me. "I didn't know how." "I'm your best friend." "I know." "No, I don't think you do." Her voice rose, then broke. "I don't think either of you do. My mother died, Callie. My mother died, and in my own house, at her funeral, there was this whole other thing happening under the floorboards, and nobody told me. It wasn't happening. Not then. But it is now?" I could not answer quickly enough. Josie's eyes filled. "Brilliant." "Nothing has happened," I said, hating the phrase even as I used it. It sounded like a teenager at a party. It sounded like guilt looking for technicalities. "We've talked, that's all. I'm trying to understand." "Understand what? Whether you're in love with my sister?" The words landed too close to a place I had not yet entered with the lights on. "I don't know." "That must be nice." "It isn't." "No? Because from where I'm standing, Wren gets to have a 16-year tragic romance. You get to have a sexual awakening in my family kitchen, and I get to find out by watching you two touch fingers over my dead mother's cardigans." The cruelty of it was not inaccuracy. It was that she was hurt enough to make the truth ugly. I felt anger rise then, defensive and useless. That's not fair. Neither is being the last person in the room to know something that apparently lived in my house for half my life. I was the last person to know, too. "You weren't," she said. "You were the person it was about." That silenced me. Josie wiped her face with the heel of her hand, furious at the tears. "I don't know what I'm angrier about. That Wren never told me. That you didn't. That Mum probably knew, because of course Mum knew everything except how to stay alive. Or that part of me wants to be happy for you, and I can't get to it because it's buried under all this." "I'm sorry." I whispered. I know you are. That doesn't fix it. No. She looked past me into the flat, where a mug sat on the table beside a stack of school drawings. Ordinary life, unaware it had been called as a witness. I need space. The phrase was calm enough to terrify me. Josie was not calm. Josie slammed, spilled, shouted, forgave before she finished accusing. Space was not her language. Space meant she had gone somewhere I could not follow by force of affection. How much? I asked. I don't know. She stepped back. Don't make me comfort you about this. I closed my mouth on whatever plea had been forming. She nodded once, as if I had passed a test I had not known I was taking, and walked away. I watched her disappear down the stairs. For the first time since we were 13, I did not know when I would hear from her again. The silence that followed was not empty. It filled every part of my day. Jokes I could not send her, small absurdities with nowhere to land, the ache of reaching for my phone and stopping. For the first time since we were 13, I did not know when I would hear from Josie again. Ren called the evening after Josie came to my flat. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times, then answered because not answering would have been a kind of performance. She knows, Ren said. Yes. I'm sorry. She's angry at both of us. She should be. I sat on the floor beside my sofa, knees drawn up, phone pressed to my ear. That's generous of you. No, accurate. The absence of self-defense in her voice undid some of my anger and made room for exhaustion. I don't know what to do. Neither do I. We sat in silence. It was strange how different silence felt with Ren now. Before, I had heard refusal in it. Now I heard thought, restraint. A person measuring what a word might cost before spending it. I can leave you alone, she said finally, if that would help with Josie. Would it help? No. A pause. But I can do it. I closed my eyes. I don't want that. The words left me before fear could edit them. On the other end of the line, Ren breathed in. Not sharply. Enough. All right, she said. I don't want to use you for comfort against your own sister either. That would be unwise. Ren. I'm agreeing with you. You're making jokes because you're upset. I contain multitudes. Despite everything, I laughed. It came out cracked. Ren's quiet softened around it. Walk with me tomorrow, she said. It was the first thing she had asked of me. Not offered, not withheld, not placed gently where I could take it or leave it without consequence. Asked. The difference moved through me. Where? I said. Along the river. 4 if you're free. I'm free. I'll meet you by the old footbridge. The next afternoon was bitterly cold, the kind of winter cold that made the air feel metallic. The river moved under a skin of gray light. Bare branches leaned over the path, their reflections broken by the current. Ren stood by the footbridge in a long black coat and a knitted hat that should have made her look severe, but instead made her look unexpectedly young. She held 2 takeaway coffees. I guessed, she said, handing me one. I looked at the lid. Oat latte, extra hot. You always burned your tongue on normal coffee and complained as if betrayed. I stared at her. What? She said. You remember my coffee order? Her ears colored. I have known you for 15 years. I don't think that explanation covers the extra hot. No, she said. It doesn't. We walked. At first we spoke of Josie because not speaking of her would have been indecent. Ren told me Josie had called her, shouted for 12 minutes, cried for 4, then hung up after saying, I'm not done being furious. This was, Ren said, more hopeful than it sounded. I agreed. Josie never announced unfinished feelings unless she intended to return for the sequel. Did you tell her about Margaret knowing? I asked. Some, not the letter, not yet. She'll hate that too. Yes. You could have told her years ago. Ren looked across the river. Yes. Why didn't you? Because telling Josie would have made it real in a way I could not control. She would have loved me loudly. She would have tried to fix what could not be fixed. She would have looked at you differently, perhaps. Or at me. I was afraid of all of it. Her breath misted in the cold. And because I underestimated her. That is the part I am most ashamed of. I thought of Josie saying, "I'm angry that you didn't think I could hold it," though she had not said it yet, not to me. The sentence seemed to be waiting somewhere ahead of us, inevitable as weather. We walked until the town thinned behind us and the path turned muddy. Ren, in ordinary life, was a revelation of small things. She noticed a dog wearing boots and said, "A man of consequence," with such solemnity that I laughed for the first time in days. She knew the names of winter plants because Margaret had taught her, and she pretended not to care. She disliked coffee, but bought it because cafes made tea taste like regret in a paper cup. She stopped once to examine a scrap of paper caught on a bench, not touching it, just reading the faded print. "Old train timetable," she said. "June 1998. She looked almost pleased, as if the world had left a page out for her. "You really do conserve everything," I said. "Only things that want to survive." "How do you know?" "I don't. I make a case and proceed with caution." "That sounds like you." "It sounds like my job." "Both can be true." She glanced at me, and the glance stayed a second longer than necessary. "Yes." The cold sharpened as the afternoon darkened. My fingers ached around the coffee cup. Ren noticed, of course. She noticed everything while pretending to notice nothing. "You forgot gloves," she said. "I'm an optimist." "It's February." "A committed optimist." She stopped walking. I stopped too. The river moved beside us with quiet insistence. Ren shifted her coffee to one hand and held out the other. The gesture was almost formal. Palm up, fingers slightly curled. Not the hallway, not the study. A question this time. Unmistakable and terrifying in its gentleness. I put my hand in hers. She closed her fingers around mine. Warmth moved through me so fast I nearly swayed. It was absurd. We were two grown women holding hands by a muddy river in winter, both grieving, both guilty, both old enough to know better than to treat a touch like revelation. But my body did not care about sophistication. It cared about her thumb resting against mine. It cared about the fact that Ren's hand shook once and then steadied. It cared that I had spent years mistaking calm for absence, when perhaps calm had been the lid on this. We did not walk. We stood there, hand in hand, watching the river carry leaves and broken light past our feet. After a while, Ren's shoulders lowered, as if some guarded part of her had been waiting years for permission to be tired. She leaned toward me, not fully, not into an embrace, just enough that her forehead came to rest against my shoulder. The weight of it was slight. The meaning was not. I turned my face toward her hair. It smelled of cold air and bergamot. I wanted to press my mouth to the top of her head. I did not because I was virtuous. Because I wanted our first kiss, if it ever came, to be something chosen in clear weather, not stolen from a storm. Ren lifted her head after a moment. Her eyes were bright, but she was not crying. "This is unwise," she said. "Yes." "I am not sorry." "Neither am I." The words were simple. They warmed me all the way home. Josie came back slowly, which was both like and unlike her. First, she sent a picture of Margaret's decorative plates stacked in a box with the message, "If I donate these, will her ghost file a complaint?" I wrote, "Only if you keep the duck-shaped gravy boat." She replied 6 hours later, "The duck is between me and God." That was all. I cried over it with such relief that I frightened the cat from downstairs, who had come to my balcony to judge me through the glass. Then she asked me to meet her for lunch in a cafe neither of us loved, neutral ground with terrible soup. She arrived 10 minutes late, wearing sunglasses despite rain. She hugged me stiffly, then sat down and said, "I'm still angry." "I know. I missed you, which is inconvenient for my righteous position." "I missed you too." "Don't be sweet. I'll lose momentum." I folded my hands in my lap to stop myself reaching for hers. "Okay." She took off the sunglasses. Her eyes were tired. "Ren came over last night." My whole body tightened. "What happened?" "We talked. Well, I talked. She stood there looking like a haunted grammar lesson, then eventually also talked." Despite myself, I smiled. Josie's mouth twitched, then steadied. "She told me Mum knew. Not everything, but enough. She told me she'd been in love with you for years and had decided silence was noble because apparently my sister learned romance from tuberculosis novels. That sounds not inaccurate." "I told her I wasn't angry that she loved you." Josie looked down at her spoon, then pushed it away. "I'm angry that she didn't think I could hold it." There it was. The sentence I had felt coming. It landed with the force of something true enough to change the room. Josie swallowed. "I know we were young. I know it was complicated. I know she's Ren and would rather be sealed in an archive box than discuss feelings. But I'm her sister. I loved her first." "Not like that," she added quickly, making a face. "Obviously, don't make it weird." "I wasn't. You were thinking sympathetically. Sometimes that's worse." She sighed. "I hate that she was alone with it. I hate that Mum knew and I didn't. I hate that you are part of this thing that hurts me, because you're usually the person I complain to about things that hurt me." "I know." "And I hate," she continued, voice wobbling, "that part of me is scared I'll lose you to her." "Oh, Josie." I reached across the table then. She let me take her hand. "You won't." "You say that, but people say all sorts of rubbish when falling in love with someone quiet and tragic." I did not correct the falling in love part. Neither did she. The omission sat between us, noticed by both. "You are my family," I said. "That doesn't become smaller because something else is becoming true." "It might change." "Yes," I said, "because lying would have been another betrayal." "It might, but not because I want less of you." Josie's mouth twisted. That was a good answer, annoyingly. "I practice on children. They are ruthless." She squeezed my hand. "I need time." "You can have it. And honesty. Even awkward honesty. Especially awkward honesty. I would rather hear something that makes me want to throw soup at you than find out by watching your hands have a conversation in my mother's bedroom." I nodded. "You're right." "Say that again. I'm grieving and need small pleasures." "You're right." "Lovely." She wiped her eyes. "Also, if you hurt Ren, I'll kill you, which is confusing because if Ren hurts you, I'll also kill her. I'm still drafting policy." "I respect the complexity of your position." "As you should." Spring did not arrive all at once. It negotiated. One mild morning, then sleet or crocuses under a tree, then a week of rain so dreary even the pigeons looked betrayed. Margaret's house moved slowly toward a new order. Josie kept it for at least a year, and Ren came by often, sometimes to help, sometimes simply to sit in the kitchen with her sister and argue about whether Margaret's recipe tin should be alphabetized. Ren and I did not rush, though wanting can make patience feel like standing barefoot in snow. We met for walks, for careful coffees, for an exhibition of medieval manuscripts where Ren became so animated discussing pigment degradation that an elderly man nearby leaned closer to listen. I watched her in rooms that did not belong to grief and found new things to love before I was ready to call them love. The way she tipped her head when thinking. The dry comments that arrived 3 seconds after everyone else had moved on. The tenderness with which she touched damaged books, never sentimental, always respectful of what had survived. She taught me that vellum has memory, that paper can be washed, that some stains should not be removed because they are part of the object's history. I did not miss the metaphor. Ren did not either. We had both become experts in pretending not to see what was obvious. By April, the first warm day arrived with the tentative confidence of a shy animal. Sunlight lay over the pavements. People emerged from houses looking suspicious of joy. The trees had that pale green haze they wear before committing to leaves. It was a Saturday. Josie was away visiting a cousin, which she had announced with theatrical significance and two separate warnings not to use my absence as a metaphor. Ren invited me to her flat for lunch. I had been there twice before, but always briefly, always with the careful propriety of people still pretending furniture could supervise them. Ren's flat was on the top floor of a converted building above a bakery, reached by stairs narrow enough to encourage honesty about how much one had exercised. It was small, full of light, and more alive than I had expected. Books everywhere, yes, but not arranged to impress. Stacked by use, by urgency, by some private system involving old receipts and pressed leaves, a green sofa with a worn arm, a kitchen table scarred by years of cups, jars of brushes on the windowsill, a framed photograph of Margaret laughing in the garden, one hand raised against the sun. "You're staring," Ren said from the kitchen. "I'm revising my theory of you." Should I be concerned? I thought your flat would be more austere. I own 3 cushions. Decadent. One has a fox on it. Scandalous. She brought out plates of food assembled rather than cooked. Bread, cheese, olives, sliced pears, a salad with too much dill because Ren believed herbs should have opinions. We ate by the open window while bakery smells rose from below, butter and sugar and warm bread. Sunlight moved across the table. Ren's hair was loose, tucked behind one ear. She looked tired in the way people look when they are no longer using all their strength to hide. After lunch, she showed me a book she was repairing for herself, not work. A volume of poetry with a cracked spine and notes in the margin written by someone long dead. "It's not valuable," she said, as if apologizing. "Does it need to be?" "No." She ran a finger along the cover. That took me an embarrassingly long time to learn. We sat on the floor beside the low bookcase because the sun had made a warm rectangle there and adulthood is overrated. Ren read me a line from the book, then stopped, embarrassed by her own voice. I asked her to continue. She did. Her reading voice was different from her speaking voice, not louder but less guarded, as if borrowed words gave her somewhere safe to stand. I watched her mouth shape the sentences. Desire moved through me slowly, not like lightning, not like the dramatic metaphors I had once expected. More like warmth returning to a hand held too long in cold water. Painful, necessary, mine. When she finished, the flat was quiet except for a bus passing below and someone laughing on the street. Ren closed the book. "Margaret would have liked this," she said. "Yes." She would have pretended not to, then quoted it incorrectly later. Confidently, with aggression. We smiled. The air between us changed, not suddenly. It had been changing all day, perhaps all spring, perhaps for 16 years. But in that moment, it became visible. Ren looked at me, really looked, and did not turn away. I felt the old instinct to fill the silence, to joke, to rescue us both from the edge. I let it pass. Some doors open only when no one is watching. Some open when both people finally are. "Callie," she said. My name in her mouth had altered over time. Once it had been an avoidance, then a confession. Now it was a place she chose to stand. "Yes. I'm going to ask you something," she said, "because I am trying not to make a religion of guessing." "All right. May I kiss you?" There were so many answers inside me that for a second none reached my mouth. I thought of the hallway, her hand around my wrist. The night after, the blue book open on my floor. Josie crying in my doorway. Margaret's letter. The river. The careful rebuilding of trust, of friendship, of self. I thought of 15-year-old me, loud and oblivious, and 18-year-old Ren, silent and terrified. I wanted to reach back through time and forgive them both for not knowing how to arrive here sooner. Yes, I said. Please. Ren's face changed, not dramatically. She did not become someone else. She became more herself. She moved slowly, giving me every chance to meet her, to stop her, to understand that this was chosen and not seized from emergency. Her hand rose to my cheek, hesitant at first, then certain when I leaned into it. Her palm was warm. I could feel the slight roughness of a paper cut near her thumb. I noticed that because I loved her, though I had not said it yet. Then she kissed me. It was not a perfect kiss. Perfect kisses are for people with too much confidence and not enough history. Ours was careful, trembling at the edges, interrupted by a breath that might have been a laugh or a sob. Her mouth was soft. Mine shook. We had waited without knowing we were waiting, lost years to fear and kindness and the strange accidents of timing, and still the kiss did not feel like a reward. It felt like an arrival. Quiet. Astonishing. Human. Ren drew back first, only far enough for our foreheads to rest together. Her eyes were closed. Mine were not. I wanted to see her. Well, she said after a moment, voice unsteady. That was not unpleasant. I laughed, and the laugh broke open into tears. Ren's eyes flew open in alarm. I'm sorry, was that too dry? Josie says I ruin moments with tone. No, I said, wiping my face with the back of my hand. It was extremely you. Is that good? It's the point. She absorbed that as if I had handed her something fragile. Then she kissed my cheek, once, with such tenderness that the tears came harder. She put her arms around me, not cautiously this time, and I went into them. For a while, we sat on the floor in the warm patch of sun with books around us and the city moving below, holding each other as if holding could be a language learned late, but fluently. There was desire there, yes, alive and growing, but it was braided with grief, with relief, with the ordinary miracle of being allowed to want without immediately losing something else. Later, when the light had shifted and the bakery downstairs had closed, Ren made tea. Real tea, not regret in a paper cup. We drank it on the sofa under the fox cushion, which I praised with appropriate reverence. My phone buzzed. A message from Josie. Are you alive? This is not a metaphor. I showed Ren, who covered her face with one hand and muttered, She is going to be impossible. She already was. That is also true, I wrote back, alive. Also, your sister owns a scandalous fox cushion. Josie replied almost immediately. I knew it. Tell her if she hurts you, I'm taking the cushion in the settlement. Ren read it over my shoulder and made a sound halfway between horror and affection. She wouldn't. She absolutely would. She hates that cushion. Josie is complex. Ren leaned against me, her shoulder warm along mine. It was such a simple thing, the weight of her there, and maybe that was why it felt sacred. Not because it was dramatic, because it was not. Because after all the years of doorways and held breath, we had reached a room with sunlight on the floor and tea cooling on the table. Because Margaret was gone and still somehow present in the way Ren let herself be loved, in the way Josie made room around her hurt, in the way I had finally stopped mistaking almost for enough. Ren did not stop being quiet. I did not stop filling silences by instinct. Josie did not stop threatening decorative objects with legal action. Grief did not leave us because spring came. It changed shape. It sat with us at tables, walked with us through rooms, appeared suddenly in songs and recipes and the smell of lemon polish. But so did love. Not the love any of us had imagined perfectly. Not the tidy kind that arrives without damaging the furniture. A love with history in its seams. A love that had waited too long and then, with fear and forgiveness and ordinary courage, decided not to wait anymore. That evening, as I was leaving Ren's flat, she walked me to the door and took my hand before I could reach for the latch. For a moment, she looked almost shy again, and I saw the girl she had been, the young woman in the garden, the sister in the corner of my drawing, all of them gathered behind her eyes. "What is it?" I asked. She shook her head. "Nothing." "Ren." A small smile. "I was just thinking that I know how to say it now." My throat tightened. "Say what?" She looked at our joined hands, then at me. No flinching, no retreat. "That I love you." The words were not new. I had heard them already in their first impossible form. But this time they did not arrive as a confession dragged from 16 years of silence. They arrived in a doorway filled with evening light, spoken by a woman who had learned that truth did not have to be an emergency. I stepped closer and kissed her, because I could, because she had asked once and I was answering still. "I love you too," I said. Outside, the first warm day of spring was cooling into night. Somewhere, in the life we were returning to, there would be hard conversations, awkward dinners, old griefs opening when we least expected them. There would be Josie calling me at midnight because she had found another box of Margaret's inexplicable manuals. There would be Ren overthinking text messages, and me learning not every silence needed rescue. There would be ordinary mornings, rain, school displays, repaired books, tea gone cold, laughter in kitchens, the slow work of becoming honest. I did not need the ending to be grand. I only needed it to be true. Ren held the door while I stepped into the hall. Then she leaned out, caught my sleeve with 2 fingers, and kissed me once more, quick and almost smiling. Not a goodbye born of fear. A promise with no performance in it. I walked down the stairs with my hand on the rail, feeling the warmth of her mouth and the steadiness of the floor beneath me. For once, nothing in me was trying to translate the moment into something safer. I let it be what it was. A beginning, late and earned. A door opened behind me. A woman waiting upstairs, not because time would wait back, but because tomorrow, finally, we would meet it together.